Sikha is, look at the Sikhas, Chelik Tazayan, the last Sikha for Parsha Trumah, which is the fifth Sikha for the Parsha. I want to give a little introduction before we learn the Sikha inside, which will make it easier to understand. I want to make a few points. We're talking about the Menorah. The Sikha talks about the making of the Menorah. One din by the Menorah was that it had to be made from a kikor. It had to be a kikor zov, a certain amount of gold, which is a kikor, and that had to be a chunk of gold, and everything in the Menorah had to be made part of that kikor. That kikor had to include everything. That's one din by the Menorah. Then there's another din by the Menorah. It had to be miksha. Miksha means that it had to be knocked out with a hammer. You couldn't make pieces and then screw them together or solder them together and make it. It had to be knocked out from the same one piece, and it turns into the konim, which are the branches, and the kafterim, the buttons, and the bechers, and all this has to be miksha. That's the two dinim that we have that we're going to be discussing here. The discussion is going to be whether the two are connected. That means that does everything that is part of the kikor have to be miksha? In other words, you have kalim that are part of the kikor. When the Torah says they have to be a kikor, and the Menorah comes from the kikor, it also includes vessels that are connected to the Menorah. Does that, because it's part of the kikor, does that have to be also part of the Menorah? If it has to be miksha, it means it can't be separated from the Menorah. Everything in the Menorah has to be miksha. And the question is, do the two things go together? Does everything that is part of the kikor have to be part of the Menorah? Or you could have certain parts that are part made of a chelik of the kikor, but it could be separate from the Menorah. That will be negeya, mainly that the Sikha is talking is about the neiros. So we have to remember, what are the neiros? You have the Menorah, the structure of the Menorah, with the kanim, the branches, and the bottom, and the top, and all the things, all the way to the top. On top of everything that the Torah talks about, there were neiros. On each one of the branches, there were neiros. Neiros means little cups that held the oil and the wick. Now, does these neiros have to be part of the Menorah or not? In other words, there is an opinion, and we'll learn it in detail in the Sikha. There's an opinion that these neiros were separate. The taka came from part of that kikor zov, but they were separate kalim. They were outside of the Menorah. When it came to light the Menorah, they would put them on top of the Menorah. They would put them on top and put the oil in, put the wick in, and light them. When it was over, they took them off. The next day next time they put them on again, or not. Or these neiros were part of the Menorah. When they made the Menorah, this was permanently part of the Menorah, part of the miksha. And that's going to be the shayla. This will also be negeya to another prat, and then we'll learn it inside, another prat. Some of the things that were part of the kikor is the malkochayim and the machtes. Now, a simple taicha of the way we learn always, and Rashi says malkochayim means like the tongues that they schlep out the psilo, the wick. The machtes are little shovels to shovel out the ashes. Now, this is one shot in these two, but these two were definitely not part of the Menorah. They were outside. They were kalim outside. Then there's another shot in these two that malkochayim doesn't mean that. Malkochayim means a cover to the on top. On top, when they had the oil with the wick, there was a cover on top, and that is part of the Menorah. And the machtes is a certain kele under it that would hold the oil, not for the lighting. Rasha, the Ramban's lotion is safolim shetachas kol neir v'neir. Under each neir there was another thing, which is also part of the Menorah. So if you hold that anything that's part of the kikor has to be miksha, has to be part of the Menorah, you can't touch that the malkochayim and the machtes were the kelim outside, because they were part of the kikor. And if everything that's part of the kikor has to be miksha, you can't touch it. You will have to touch the other touch. That these two mean the cover, which was part of the Menorah, and the kela that was covered in the Menorah that grabbed and held the oil that came dripping, whatever it is. And this is what we're going to discuss here, how Rashi learns in this inyan. So we'll bring the Gemara, the Ramban, the way he learns, and then bring what Rashi learns in Pshuto Shel Mikra. Now let's learn aside. If you have this Agdama, it'll be easier to understand. So the Rebbe says like this: in a Meif Masiyas HaNeiros from the Menera, in the way they made the Neiros. So we have to remember the Neiros is that little cup that held the oil and the wick. When it came to make these Neiros, is da machlekes in Gemara. There's an argument in Gemara. Like ein day is and the Neiros going to tell from the Menera. One opinion in the Gemara is that these Neiros were part of the Menera. They were part of it. They were when the mixture happened. That was part of the Menera. Well, this was the Menera. That was a mixture because that the Menera has to be mixture, which means all has to be one part, or not prokim mamish, and not pushed little pieces. Is keilah at the Neiros. The mixture that the Menera, as the Gemara says, one opinion includes them in the Neiros. So the Neiros were part of the Menera itself. It wasn't a separate entities. A zweite day is, a second opinion is, as the Neiros are given a besondere Sache from the Menera. No, that these Neiros, these cups, were separate outside of the Menera. Nor farther adlok, before they had to light it, they would take these cups and put it on top of the branches of the Menera. When the Seder from Atovas Nikra and Neiros is given, and then when they had to clean it and prepare the Menera, the Seder was the salkon from the Menera. They would take it off, they put it down in the tent, and he would clean it, etc., etc. So we have two opinions whether the Neiros were, the first opinion, the Neiros were part of the Menera, and the second opinion, that was they were part of Miksha, because the Menera was Miksha, this is part, and the second opinion, they were separate. When the Gemara verbindet das mit der Plukte, the Gemara connects this with the argument, sie das was steht bei der Menera, Kikar Zov, Torah Yaseis, Eskola Kelem Eilab, that when the Posuk says that you should have a kikar of gold, of pure gold, from that you should make all the kelim meint eich the Neiros. There's an argument whether this includes the Neiros, whether the Neiros were also part of the kikar. As eich zei boys na kikar. So there's a machlekes if the Neiros were part of this kikar. Ulefize, if it was part of the kikar, they had to be mixture. So the Gemara holds that if it was part of the kikar, it had to be mixture. So therefore, this opinion that holds that it was part of the kikar holds that it was connected to the Menera. Because if it's part of the kikar, it had to be part of the Menera, it had to be mixture. Other, there's another opinion, nor the Menera alone is bomb in that kikar. The Menera itself was made of a kikar. But the Neiros, but the Neiros that weren't part of the kikar. If they were not part of the kikar, if he says, the Neiros didn't give a mixture. So according to that, the Neiros were not part of the Menera, because whatever was part of the kikar had to be mixture, had to be part of the Menera. So this opinion that says that it was separate holds it was not part of the kikar. That's what the Gemara says. The Rambam paskent halacha, Menera habo zov, a Menera that's made of gold. Called the Rabbi holds says that this all these dinim that you have to have mixture and then you have to have all these decorations. It's only the Menera was made of gold. They could have made the Menera of not of gold. Actually, after Chanukah, they made it wasn't gold. But if it's made of gold, it needs all these decoration and everything. So the Rambam says, if it's made of gold, tiakulo kikor im neiresel. It was made of a kikor, and it includes in the kikor, it includes the neiros, those cups, or tiakulo mixture. And mamela ought to be mixture. So mamela, the cups, these cups had to be mixture, had to be part of the menera. Shaneres kavoyim b'menera. These neiros were set, were part of the menera. They're part of the kikor. So, and therefore it was mixture, because everything that's in the kikor has to be mixture. This is Rambam, where machlekes in Gemara of the Rambam. The Rebbe says, "Shingret feel more." I spoke many times as Rashi v'Pirusha Lateiris mefarash adar chapshat. That Rashi, when he explains psukim in Chumash, he goes according to the simple meaning of the words. Afilo when it says nit masim mit chelik halacha shebeteira, even if it doesn't fit to the chelik halacha. In other words, Rashi could write something as pshat in the Gemara against pshat in Posek. I mean, against the Gemara, against halacha, because it's not Rashi in Chumash is not telling us halachas. He's learning the simple pshat, and there are many ways to learn the Torah. One of them is pshat. So pshat is the simple pshat, and halacha is a different derech, a different way. So Rashi is not limited to the way it is up halacha. So Rashi could say things because according to the simple meaning of the words, it comes out a certain way. And we see it very clearly in the way Rashi explains what we just said. In this sinya, we will see that Rashi not necessarily goes according to the Gemara. Wie gesagt, we said before, verbindet die Gemara die Plukte zu Neiris darf man sein Mikshah mit dem Neire. The Gemara connects this din, whether the Neiris, these cups, have to be Mikshah, which means they have to be part of the Neire. The Gemara connects it with their Plukte zu seine boys from the Kikor. But the argument, if it came from the Kikor, then it had to be Mikshah. And if it was not Mikshah, if it didn't have to Mikshah, it means it didn't come from the Kikor. And with the Ramban says it very clearly. Al das kulam, Rambam says, both opinions hold one thing. Both opinions agree that if it came from the Kikor, it had to be Mikshah. If something had to come from that Kikor, it had to be Mikshah. The argument was whether the Neiris came from the Kikor. That's what the Gemara said before, as we said. If it didn't come from the Kikor, it didn't have to be Mikshah. It could be a separate thing. So it could be separate. If it came from the Kikor, it had to be Mikshah. But one thing is clear, that if it came from the Kikor, every Ramban says, Al das kulam. Rebbe underlines the word kulam. Everyone agrees to that. When the fighters are masbir, so that's why the Ramban explains, a later day, there is an opinion in a Braisa called the Braisa of Melechas HaMishkan. Adim el kochayim umachtes boys from the Kikor, that this that we said, that they said there's two kalim to the menorah, the Melchayim and the Machtes, and they came from the Kikor. So he says that they learn Zaynis, they need the kalim nifrodim from the menorah. If you hold that they came from the Kikor, then you can't learn the simple pshat Melchayim and Machtes. As we said before, the Rebbe will quote it soon, that the simple pshat Melchayim are the tongues, and the Machtes is the shovel. They were definitely not part of the menorah. But if they were from the Kikor, how could you say that they were not? How could they be from the Kikor if they were not Mikshah? So the Ramban says, according to the Svara, that they did come from the Melchayim and the Machtes did come from the Kikor. So you cannot learn Melchayim and the Machtes were the separate kalim. The kalim, nicht kan kalim nifrodim from the menorah. They cannot be separate from the menorah. Nor atel from the menorah. They have to be part of the menorah, because if they came from the Kikor, the way the Braisa learns, it had to be Mikshah. So you can't touch the regular meaning of Melchayim Machtes. So how will we touch Melchayim? Melchayim is shehem she'esim al pi haneir stashel zov. On top of each neir, they put up a cover, and the cover covered it, and that was part of the menorah. A Machtes means hem safolim shetachas kol neir v'neir. They're like little also cups that were under each neir, which was also part of the menorah. And the Ramban says you have to learn like that. You can't learn the regular pshat in Melchayim or Machtes, because if it was from the Kikor, it had to be Mikshah. And those kalim, the tongue and the Machte, the shovel, were not connected to the menorah. Rashi Oberzok, the Pirusha from Kikor Zov Toyer, Rashi says different. Rashi says, when he explains Kikor Zov Toyer, so he says like this: Shalei mishkola im kol keileh al Kikor. It had to be a Kikor, the weight of a Kikor, the menorah with the kalim. So Rashi learns clearly that the kalim were part of the Kikor. Ufar them touched it, and then Rashi explains what is the Melchayim and the Machtes. Melchayim, he says, him atzvosim, him are the tongues. Machteseo, the Machtes, him kimin bazichik tanu shechayteben, they're like little shovels that you use. And they are not part of the menorah. Kum tois ladaite, so according to Rashi, we see something different than we said before. As eich the kelim hanifrodim from the menorah seine from the Kikor. Rashi learns that even the kelim which are separate, not part of the mixture of the menorah, also come from the Kikor. So what we said before, that the two things are connected. If it came from the Kikor, it had to be mixture. Rashi doesn't learn like that. Rashi says clearly not. Rashi says the Kikor included the Melchayim and the Machtes, which when he teaches it means separate, and he still learns that's from the Kikor. So according to Rashi, it doesn't have to be that whatever was part of the Kikor has to be mixture. The Taima Yeshlemer, and the Rebbe says, I could say his reason. And again, because Rashi teaches everything according to simple pshat, if you look in the simple psukim, you'll see that what Rashi says seems to be the pshat in the pasuk. And what the Rebbe says like this: the Pirush HaPoshut Fun, the simple meaning of number one Melchayim Machta, on these two kalim, the kol mokim in Tanakh, wherever it's in Tanakh, is a kalim nifrit from the zach v'velcha benutztes. It's a separate kalim. So the literal translation Melchayim Machtas is separate kalim. The dugma by the Mizbeach, it says by the Mizbeach, you had some of these kalim, and they were not part of the Mizbeach, that's for sure. So number one, Rashi sees that these kalim are separate from the menorah. On the other hand, there's another posik says kikar zov toyer yasa esos kol hakelim eila, that you should make all the kelim from the kikar. Is as eso the meneira and kol hakelim eila. So it comes out that it, meaning the meneira, and all the kelim, the Rebbe all means all the kelim. Alle kelim was when the mountain posik. All the kelim mentioned in the posik darfen gemacht werden from the kikar zov toyer. Has to be made from that kikar, from the pure gold of that kikar. So Rashi says from the psukim I see both things, that the kelim could be separate kelim. So the malkachayim and the machtas are separate kelim. That's poshet. It says also that all the kelim have to be from the kikar. So, and they were not mixture because the simple pshat of malkachayim machtas is separate kelim. So Rashi says in simple pshat we see they're not connected. You could have something that's made from the kikar, but it doesn't have to be mixture. According to this, like Pirish Rashi is that knife and mixture nicht verbunden mit Shir for kickers off to it. According to this, it comes out that Rashi holds that the condition that the meneira has to be made mixture is not connected to the shir of kicker. In other words, the kicker, not everything that's part of the kicker has to be mixture. Kum tuis, it comes out as from them was the neira some gedarf sein from them kicker. Now, we're talking by the Mokachayim and the Machtas. What about the neiras? Now, in the Gemara, it seems clearly that the two opinions, whether the neiras were part of the meneira or not, is dependent whether it was from the kicker. If it was from the kicker, it had to be part of the meneira. If not, not. But according to Rashi, that it's not connected. So therefore, kum tuis, as from them, but the neiras, some gedarf sein from them kicker, that the neiras for sure had to be from the kicker, is l'shitos and nitok and echocha azem gemusay mixture. There's no proof it had to be mixture with the meneira because they're not connected. So this we see clearly. It's not like the Gemara. In the Gemara it's connected, but in Rashi it says clearly you could be from the kikor and not mixture. So we know that lagabe the Melkachayim, that the way he teaches that it's definitely kelim, separate kelim, and it's still part of the kikor and it's not mixture. Now what about the neiris? It's not clear. Were the neiris part of the meneira or not? Now, if you would learn that anything that's part of the kikor has to be part of the meneira mixture, then there's poshet. Since it was definitely part of the kikor, the posuk says that the neiras were part of the kikor, these cups on top, so it had to be mixture. But since Rashi in his pshat learns that they're not connected, you could be part of the kikor. So part of the gold of that original kikor could be used for something separate. So it's no raya whether the neiras on top were a permanent part of the meneira or not. We don't know. So it's no raya. Now Rashi doesn't say clearly. See, that's the whole thing. If Rashi would write clearly whether the neiras were part of the meneira, part of the mixture or not, we'd have a Rashi doesn't write. So if you've not learned what the Rebbe learned till now, but you just learned the Gemara, you would say it's obvious that if it's part of the kicker, it has to be mixture. But from according to Rashi, it's not true. It doesn't have to be. So then we don't know. But at first glance, it seems Rashi halt that the tzivui mixture by meneiras kele the neiras. Yeah, the Rebbe is going to bring rayas, different rayas. It seems that according to Rashi, the Torah says mixture includes the neiras. That means that the neiras on top were not separate cups that were put on every time they lit the meneira, but they were part of the meneira. Where do we see that? A mixture to yosa meneira, the pasuk where it says that the meneira should be made mixture, which means all from one piece connected without separating them, is Rashi Mafara. Rashi teaches like this. Means shaleya senachuyas. You shouldn't make it like pieces. But leyase koneo v'neireseho. You shouldn't make the branches, and you shouldn't make the neiras. And again, the neiras mean these cups that the oil was in. You shouldn't make it averim, like limbs by limb. Then you'll connect them. Everything has to come from one piece. You bang with a hammer and makes the konim, the branches, become separated. Since you're not allowed to make it piece by piece and then connect it, so it seems, so you would think that since Rashi says you have to have everything of this kikor has to be mixture and you can't make pieces separately, so obviously the neiras, which is part of the kelim of the kikor, has to be part of the meneira. It can't be separate. It has to be mixture. But the Rebbe says, no, if you look into it better, it does not muchach. It's not a must. You don't have to say that. Rashi zok nor. If you look at exactly, and the Rebbe is in the words of Rashi, and very precise in every detail of what Rasha says. So Rasha says like this. Rasha zok nor. All Rasha says is as miksha tiose amenera, that the menera has to be made miksha is shela the menera is on the zayin ha'efu for neighbor mever v'chayad bikin. It means like this: the menera, whatever is the menera, cannot be made from pieces and then to connect it. Das heißt, the menera darf nicht sein zu neivgeklebt from besondere Themen. The menera cannot be connected from different pieces. Und in dem sagt Rasha, so that's what Rasha says, as Punkt with the Knei Menera haben nicht getornt an Everim, just like the branches could not be made separate, and then you connect them, as they tormen nicht mit Medaber sein die Neder zu the Menera. You can't take the Neders, which are a separate entity, and connect it to the Menera. Weil dann, the Menera nicht gewähren mit Tichachas. If there is a certain piece that's separate, and then you put it on the Menera, then the Menera is made not from one piece. Aber wegen dem sie die Neder können sein und bleiben bei so einer Chalokin von Neder. That's all. Anything that's part of the Menera cannot be made from a piece from the outside. But who says that pieces that are from the outside, which you're not going to connect them to the Menera, cannot be made separately? You just can't. Whatever the Menera is, cannot be made pieces. So if the Menera, if the Neders would be part of the Menera, in the Chaname, you can't make them separate. But it doesn't mean that you can't make it separate and not connected to the Menera. Only what is in the Menera has to be one piece. So if they stay separate, Chalokim, and every time you light it, you put it down on top of the branches. Rasha doesn't say that the Nedas have to be connected. He just says that the Menera has to be mixture. Anything that's a Menera. But you could have pieces that's made from a shtickle from the original kikor, and it stays separate. So the Menera still remains mixture. In them Meifen, the Menera mixture. If you never connected it, the Menera remains mixture. She's michtichachas. The Menera, whatever is the Menera is one piece, is gone double to the Menera, nothing better to the Menera. So the Rebbe is trying to show it, even though Rasha doesn't say, but it's very possible that Rasha holds that the Nedas were not connected. And even though they were part of the kikor, but the kikor, not everything as part of the kikor has to be mixture, and it's no stira, because mixture means the Menera has to be mixture. And then we see that the kikor could include something else which is never going to be connected to the Menera. So it doesn't go against the fact that the Menera has to be mixture. This explains also, we look back at the Rasha that the Rebbe just brought, that he's not allowed to make it cholias. Don't make the branches and the neres separately, but they all have to be one piece, and the branches have to be separated from each other by bringing it as one piece. Why doesn't Rasha add, just like in the beginning he said, that you can't make the konim, the branches, and the neres pieces? Why doesn't he say then the same thing? And therefore, it all has to come from one piece, like you bang and you separate the konim and the neres. Now we understand why, because Rashi probably holds that the Nedas were not connected. The Nedas were not part of the mixture. The Nedas were separate and stayed separate. So that will be according to like the opinion in the Gemara that the Nedas were a separate entity, and it doesn't matter that it had to be part of the kikor, because we said before Rashi clearly learns it doesn't have to be part of, even if it's part of the kikor, it doesn't have to be mixture. Die Baumer gefindt mit Korin Pirish Rashi, which Shita is in them, since we don't find all the Rebbe said till now, it's possible, according to Rasha, that it should be separate and be part of the kikor, and nevertheless not to be mixture. It's possible, it's no condition to Rasha, but he doesn't say clearly exactly how he holds, since we don't find. Und sagt echt mit dem any idea. Maybe Rasha doesn't have any hechler, doesn't know, but Rasha doesn't say any idea. Wie sagt in andere Erter, wo der Pirische Posig is not clear. Other places where the Posig is not clear, Rasha says, I don't know. Here he doesn't say it. Darf man sagen, as in Limud Pshat, it's a very posh that if you learn Pshat and simple Pshat in Posik, it's so obvious. A Rasha darf es nicht durchsteigen sein. Rasha doesn't have to say it. Mezet is often according to Psukim alone. We will see in the Psukim whether it was connected to the Menera or not connected to the Menera. And a lot of times the Rebbe says this, that Rasha doesn't write certain things where he should, like Rasha doesn't answer certain kashas on the Psukim. And the Rebbe says, why? Because it must be so simple that Rashi relied that we'll use our own brains and we'll figure it out. Here too, if you look at the Psukim, you don't need Rashi to tell you, you'll see exactly what Rashi holds. What the Pshat is, the Memela, that shit is Rashi. And there is a beer in them, the explanation is like this. The Seder in the Pasha from Lechas HaMenorah is like this. We look in the Pasha, the Seder of way the Torah talks about making the Menorah. It says like this. First it says the commandment, Vasisa Menorah. Zov, Gemer, Miksha, Yerechel, Kono, Gviel, Kaftareo, Prachem, and you. Make a Menorah of gold. Miksha, make it, which means, as we said before, knock it out, don't make it into pieces. From the bottom, from the foot, the corner, the branch in the middle, the bechers, the cups, the buttons, the flowers, all should be from it, all from one, from Miksha. Then the pasuk goes into details how you make it, the branches of the Menorah, how you make those cups. And it's Messiah, the cups, I don't mean the cups of the oil, the bechers that were on the branches. And the pasuk finishes off, the buttons and the branches should be from it. Kula miksha achazofta should all be one miksha with pure gold. Fine. So the pasuk talks about the Menorah and all parts of the actual Menorah, the buttons, all these things which are around the Menorah. As the nochte, then after he finishes off telling us it has to be miksha, then he says vasisos neriseo shiva. You should have the neiros. And what are the neiros? We said the neiros were not mentioned before. Neiros are the extra cups which held oil. Before we were talking about the konim, the branches, and the kafterim and the gavim, all things. Now the Torah says you should make the neiros 7 neiros, and you have the malkoch and malchotaisis, kikas off toir. Should all be from the kikar. What do we see from here? That all these scalim are from the kikar, but the Torah writes it separate. Not when the Torah wrote the miksha b'negei the Menorah itself. Also in Pasha Vayakim was very erzählt, wie man gemacht the Menorah bepeil. Here it's talking about the commandment. There it says exactly how they made it. Same thing. Stehen die alle Brote. Derselbe Seder. That's the same Seder. First it says that how to make all the details of the Menorah, and it all has to be miksha. And after he finishes with saying miksha, then he says, afterwards, make neiros, make 7 neiros. What does that show? Von dem was der Tzibuk Asisis Neriseo game steht noch die Protein von der Asif von Gufam Neira. Since the making of these cups, these neiros that held oil, is written after all the details of how you made the Menorah itself, and noch ein Tzibuk Kula Mikshach, and after it says the Menorah has to be Miksha, and after it finishes with that, then it says make neiros. What does that show? These movements understood as like Pshute Shel Mikro, Derech Pish Rasha Al that simple pshat. Rasha doesn't say it, but that's the derech of Rasha. That these neiros are not part of the Menorah. They're separate things. They're similar to the two Malkachei Matiseo, which Rasha learns also are separate from the Menorah, the tongues and the shovel. When the Torah talks about making the neiros, you look back at the pasuk that says Vasisos Neiriseo Shiva Umalkachei Matiseo. So these are all things which come after the Torah talks about the miksha, which is on the Menorah itself. So what do we prove from here? That in simple pshat, which automatically probably Rasha learns like that because he learns Pshuto Shemikra, the neiros are not part of the Menorah. They are part of the kikar, but Rasha learns the kikar and the miksha are two separate things. They're part of the kikar, but they're not part of the Menorah itself. They're outside of the Menorah. So that's one svara, one hichocha. Noch hichocha of them. Another proof is in Parsha Pekudi, but it tells him that they brought the Mishkan to Meshach. Parsha Pekudi, when it says what they even finished and they brought the Mishkan to Meshach, it says like this. Amongst the things that says they brought the Samneira Atera, the pure Menorah, Es Neireseho, and the Neiris. Why is that separate? Is Bishlei maybe that learn the Neiris and when you frozen from the Menorah? If we would learn that these Neiris were separate from the Menorah, his movement was the postic tells they use bazunder and the Seder Avos. So we understand why the Torah makes 2 things out of it. They brought the Menorah, it's one thing. Then they brought another thing, they brought the Neiros. But the Neiros and given Miksha with the Menorah. If you learn that these Neiros were part of the Menorah and they were part of the Miksha, but ich kann not zu sagen, so it makes no sense to say, I'm gebracht the Menorah und nicht Neirisel. They brought the Neiros and in it also they brought the Neiros. Bringen the Menorah, wenn wir gebracht hat the Neiros. If the Neiros is one with the Menorah, if you bring the Menorah, you brought the Neiros. Punkt, wie es passt nicht zu sagen, I'm gebracht the Menorah und die können gewinnen. Just like it makes no sense. They brought the Menorah and they brought the branches of the Menorah and they brought the bechers of the Menorah. This is all part of the Menorah. Since the Torah says they brought the Menorah and they brought the Neiros, proves that from simple pshat in the words, that the neighbors were not part of the Menorah. Appear now the Rebbe says, based on this, as Leib shitas Rasha b'pirush Torah, that according to the way Rasha learns in Pshat and Chumash, saying the neighbors nit nichlal make sure that the neighbors are not part, not included in this din that the Menorah has to be miksha. That werden verantwortet kamishenuyim legabado. So this will answer certain changes we find here. Und mir is in Pirish Rashi and Parsha Vayakel. Changes in Vayakel. That's the difference between Vayakel, the way the Torah writes it, the Vayakel and here, and also certain questions in the way it's in Vayakel. With the Torah that Nochamal Vegem Malach Sanishka, with the Torah talks again about Malach Sanishka, we'll look at those, we'll compare the psukim here and there, and we'll see there's changes, and even there, Gufa, there are certain questions. And based on this thing, this will be answered. And this is what he says. What will we see? In Posik, ves Menorah Samoyer, ves Kileh, ves Neresel, on this Posik, that he brought the Menorah that shines, and the Kalim, the vessels, and the Neires, remember that. Stellt sich Rashi auf Neresel, so Rashi quotes the words Nereseho, and explains, and this is Mafarish. And he says, what is that? Lutzinish Balaz. In French, in Old French, it's called Lutzinish. And as the Rebbe will say, soon the word Lutzinish in French, because the Rebbe knew Pashut French, means light. And what do they mean, these Neires? Rashi says, the Zichin cups, that the oil and the wicks are in it. That's what Rashi says there as a translation for the word Neires. Neresel. It's not verstandig, it's not understood. Number one, if the Werter is Neresel in unser Parsha, and the words Neresel in Parsha's Trumah, for the Neires HaMenorah and the Montzim Eshtemol, with these Neires of the Menorah I mentioned the first time, Rashi says basically the same thing. He says, what are the Neires? Like cups, that he put in it the oil and the wick. So Rashi over there in Trumah already in our Parsha explained it. Rashi already in Parsha's Trumah already translated, explained what the Neiros are. Why does he have to repeat it? And it's not Stamakasha. Why? The Tmi is noch größer, the Kasha is bigger. Rashi allein sagt in Parsha Vayakel. Rashi in Parsha Vayakel says mit etliche psukim free, a few psukim before this, Rashi says, Kvar pirashti nidvas amishkan malachti b'mokem tzavos, that I already explained everything about the Mishkan and the Melechas Mishkan earlier, and that's why Rashi is not explaining it again here. My high time is that Rashi nit mefarish, therefore Rashi does not explain again Ruba de Ruba from the Nyonim and the Nitvis and Melechas Mishkan, doesn't explain again most of the things that have to do with the making, giving donations for the Mishkan itself. Unless there's something there new that we would not know from Parsha Vayakel. But everything that's already written in Parsha Vayakel, and there's nothing new here, Rashi said, I explained it, I'm not explaining it again. But he relies on what he explained before. Since Rashi already explained what the word Neres is, that these are the kalim, bazichin, that hold the oil and the wick. Why does he repeat it again? So if Rashi would repeat everything again, so it's a kasha, why does he do it? But it would be no kasha on this pasuk. Everything else he doesn't, because we know it from before. This we also know. Why does Rashi repeat it again? So made a kasha. Then we have another shayla. Why in Parshas Vayakel, Rashi not only explains in Hebrew, Lashon Kodesh, what they are, the natives, he adds the French word. He starts off by saying L'chinish Balaz. And in Parshas Trumah, he doesn't do that. It's either this or that. If just explaining what Rashi says, that it means cups for holding the oil on the wick, it's not enough. Maybe the child or whoever's learning the posik, and even Rashi, so you need to explain it to him in his language. If that's so, Rashi should have said it over there where he explained the first time. Because if you can't understand from the word bazichin, we wouldn't know it there either. In unser Parsha, you should have said it in Parsha Trumah. If you don't need to come on to this word in the other language, obviously because what Rashi explains is good enough. But when he says Kamei Bezichon is good enough, so why in Vayakel he has to bring the laws, bring the other language? So the difference. So here we see a kasha on that parsha, on that Rashi, and also the comparison with the two Rashis. So based on what we said before, it'll be understood by first bringing in another question in Rashi. But you feel more gerät wegen dem, was jeder Wort und das in Pirish Rashi, as I said many times, every word, every letter in Rashi is exact. That's what Rebbe, some people are not so medayik in the mamish, the Rebbe, every os. Not only that, now das is nicht nur benegei die Werte from Gufa Pirish, not only the words of his commentary, of his interpretation, every word is exact. Eich die Werte, was is meitig from Posik in den Dibra Mascho, seine Bediek. Even the words that Rashi quotes in the heading of each Rashi is exact. Rashi only quotes those words which are needed, or for the kasha of Rashi, when it bothers him, or with the teretz, but everything is mediyik, not a word more, not a word less. Now, einer for the Erte, one of the places where we see very clear that there must be a diuk. See, we don't see clearly what the diuk is, why Rashi, that the Rebbe will explain. But that there is a diuk, we see here very simple. What? The meduyik, how the heading of Rashi is meduyik. We see it like this. He's in the even the bottom Pirish Rashi. This Rashi that we're bringing now, there we see it very clearly. How? Look at this, very simple. In Posik now, in this Posik where it says that they finished and they brought Meneira Samoyer, the Meneira that brings light, Veske Leho, and the Kalim, the vessels, her Kalim of the Meneira, Ve'es Neira and the Neiras, these cups, Ve'es Shemen Amoyer, and the oil that brings light. Schreibt Rashi drei besondere Dibramas. Also Rashi on that posuk has three separate pieces. Each one has its own heading. First, Rashi says, and the words quotes the words ve'es keleho and the kelim. Which are the kelim? So Rashi says lokachai mamachtes. Those are the tongues and the shovels. Then Rashi says neirei seho, and he says lutzinish, and he says that means those cups that hold the oil and the wicks. Then a third piece. Rashi quotes ve'es shemen amoyer and Rashi explains what's so special about the Moed. But we see one thing here. We see a very obvious change. In dem ersten und letzten Dibra Maschel, the first piece of Rashi, the heading, and the last piece of Rashi, the third one, its heading, is Rashi Maitik from Posek Eichlen Wort Ve'es. Rashi quotes from the word, look back, SK Leo, and explains what that is. The last one, he says, Ve'es Shemen Amoyer, he gives an explanation to that. Dagegen dem zweiten Dibra Maschel, but in the middle one, the second one, is a Maitik Nord and Wort Nerisel. Here he just brings the word Nerisel and not the word Ves, not the word Ves. So one thing is clear here, that there's a diuk. Otherwise it makes no sense. Now we're going to see what is the diuk. That we need the Rebbe to explain us. But the Rebbe expects it to be, it thinks it's very simple, so we should understand it ourselves. Pia now, but based on what we said before, I say, Pirish Rashi, on his natives, me give any cloud mixture. That according to Rashi, these natives, these cups that held the oil, was not part of the mixture, that was not connected part of the Meneira. He says, Muk will understand it. The Neiras according to Rashi, Tishite. The Neiras are not part of the Meneira itself. So we have to say, when the Posik zogt kikar yase eisos kol hakelim eile, when the Posik says you should make a kikar, eiso, which is the Meneira, and then it says as kol hakelim eile, all these kelim, so where is the Meneiras? Where are the Meneiras included? Is it included in the Meneira or is it included in the Kalim? If we learn that if the cups, the Neiras, were part of the Meneira, so it's included in the Meneira. It says when he said they brought the Meneira, it includes this because it's part of the Meneira. If you learn the Neiras were separate, so when you have the Meneira itself, this is not included. So what is it included in? In the next word, where it says Kol HaKelim. The Neira is I know from the Kleyam Neira. Neira and the Kelim, but the Neira is not part of the Meneira. Shas me kommt der Parshas Vayakel. When we come to Vayakel, the Posuk sagt das Meneira Samoyer. Ve'eskele was Neira. There it says the Meneira that shines. Ve'eskeleo, ve'es Neira. We don't understand. It's hard to understand. We said before that according to Rashi, the Neiras are not part of the Meneira. It's part of the Kelim. So why does it say separately the Kelim and the Neiras? When it says the Kelim, it includes the Neiras. Since it's Keleo. which means includes the Neiris, as we said. Why is Neiris Bazunder? It's only a kasha according to the Rebbe learned Pshat. So Rashi, if the Rebbe said the Pshat, Rashi learns that the Neiris are part of the Kalim, not part of the Menorah. Rashi has a problem now. This goes against Rashi. Here it says separately Kalim and Neiris. If Neiris is not part of the Menorah, then it's included in the Kalim. Why did it say twice? Kedei Sefar to answer this shayla, Kedei dos Sefar to answer this question, stellt sich Rashi, so Rashi knows this. The Eske Leo, Rashi quotes the word Eske Leo, und is mafarish malkachayim machtis. Yeah, he quotes and the Neiris and the Kalim. I mean, which are the Kalim, the makachayim, the tongues and the shovels. Like the noch is a mighty posik Neiris, and right after that he quotes from the posik the word Neiris, and thereby mashmi the word ves from the word Neiris. He skips the word Neiris. What is Rashi trying to show you something? Rashi did that with the kavona to matgisha damit, with the purpose of stressing and midarf lenen dem posik iluvis volt farne reseo nit gestanden the word ves. We have to learn this based on knowing that the natives were part of the kalim. So you have to learn the posik as if the word ves would not be there. Why? Because Neriseo are part of the kalim. So says the Pirish from posik is Rashi doesn't know what the pshat in the posik is. Not the kalim and the natives. The pshat is as if it would mean ve'eskileo v'zei zayne makachayim machtas from Neriseo. When the posik says, let's look back at the posik. Neiris amor ve'eskileo ve'sneriseo. The question was, why is Neriseo separate if it's part of the kalim? So you have to learn that it's not separate. It says kileo, and Rashi says it means the malkachayim and machtas, and what's part of the kileo, the neiris. If it wouldn't say ves, it could have said ves kileo neiriseo. So Rashi especially shows that this is kilu. The posik is like that. That the word ves is kilu. It's not there. So as kileo, Rashi says it means the two, the tongues and the shovels. Neiriseo is part of that. So that's why Rashi specifically did not bring the Masr to tell us it's like that. The only problem is, so why does it say ves? Und der Rebbe weiter, bleibt doch aber nicht verstandig, für was darf der Posik Taka ausstellen in itself und zwischen der Kleo und Nere. Why Taka does the Posik write separately? If it's included in Kileo, and the Torah says Kileo means Neriseo, also part of it is Neriseo, but nevertheless it says ves, and making it a separate union. Why does the Torah here make it? So the Rashi is answering it as if it's not a separate thing, and it's not a part of the Kalim, it's not part of the Menorah. But then the question is why? Why does the Torah make it separate? So they have answered very simple. Dem sagt Rashi, that's why Rashi only here of this posik, Rashi says the Ritzinish Balaz. He calls the Laz. Why? But the Shadish from the word Balaz, the root of this word Balaz of Ritzinish, meant Lichtigkeit, means light. Und der Tam for was the Neiris, wenn non gerufen als Shem Ha'er, the Neiris are the ones that bring light. The Menorah is called a Menorah, with the Pasuk says Menorah's Hamoer. What makes the Menorah into Menorah Hamoer? The oil and the wick that brings the fire. Where were they? Where was that? In the Neiris. So really, what makes the Menorah into being what it is? There are other Kalim too. You can't say that the tongues make the Menorah into a Menorah. Make the Menorah would fulfill its purpose. But the Neiris, which holds the oil, that makes the Menorah. So it's Vazichish Hashem v'Apsilus and Sunibam. These are the Kalim which the oil and the wick are in it. So it says, because in the Neiris, which held the oil and the wick, there expresses itself the purpose, the goal of the Menorah itself. So schaffen Lichtigkeit, the Menorah to bring light. Was wird geschaffen von das, was is in the Neiris? It happens, the light comes from what's in this Neiris, which is the Shem and the Psil and Sunibam. So therefore, this is the main thing of the Menorah. Und wie bald as the Neiris eine der Ike von der ganzen Menorah, since the Neiris, these cups, is the main part of the Menorah. The whole Menorah was made for light. And these are the parts that make light. It's verstandig for what the Pasuk tells you, is besonder von the andere Kliyam Menorah. So the Torah wants to make it separate. So the Pale, it's included in the Kalim. Torah nevertheless makes it separate. And Rashi tells us that by writing that as if it wouldn't say S. Nevertheless, it says VS and the Menera because Sof Kosof, what is the Menera? What makes the Menera into a Menera? That's Dafke these Neras. So the Rebbe learns clearly, which is not like other Meforshim, because other Meforshim don't really follow this, that Rashi could go against the Gemara. Some places they do say, but B'derech Klal not. So according to that, you can't learn this whole thing because in the Gemara it seems very clearly that Kikor, if it's part of the Kikor, it has to be part of Miksha. The Rebbe says no. According to Rashi, Kikor, it could be part of Kikor. Miksha only means whatever is in the Menera has to be Miksha, but you could have part of the Kikor not. So according to that, all this that we learn is understood. This is one of those sikhs that's like a good puzzle that you put all the pieces together and it comes out made it. Okay.
Yeshikaya.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. Good to know.